Hi everybody, Mr. Gibson here, and obviously I'm out today, but here is your sub plan. It's going to be delivered entirely through YouTube. Our substitute teacher is going to be walking the class through the different steps of today's lesson. So if you haven't already, please make sure that you turn in your Chapter 9 notes into our Darth Vader accordion file. Also, make sure that you pick up the graphic organizer for the 4 Supreme Court cases that we're going to be looking at today. These are some reminders for next week. Next week's a busy week for us. Firstly, on Wednesday night, you have your second School G discussion thread due. And remember, this is looking at whether or not we live in a Hamiltonian or Jeffersonian America currently. So please don't forget about that. If you have not completed the Google Classroom assignment on the document captain annotation on the Louisiana Purchase because you were gone at the English Jack London field trip, please make sure that you do that sometime over the weekend or next week. I'm going to be grading those on Friday. So please, if you have not done that already and turned it in on Google Classroom, please make sure you do it. Big number one reminder is that next Friday, on the 23rd, is your first unit test. The 25 multiple choice questions are going to be solely on content from chapters 8 through 9. So make sure that you look at the back of your unit calendars, and that section there is going to be on the multiple choice for portion of the test. And then, of course, you should have your Unit 1 long essay prompt on Jefferson, Hamilton, the Constitution, and the Articles of Confederation. Remember, you will be able to use your outline guidelines on the test. And all of these are posted on the website along with some additional support materials that you can use over the weekend as you prepare for the test. When I come back on Tuesday of next week, we'll be spending some time outlining your essays, as well as wrapping up some final things on Chapter 8 and 9 through lecture. And then don't forget, on unit test days, the only thing that's due are lecture notes. So your Unit 1 lecture notes will be due on that Friday as well. And remember, all that takes is a staple. So those are the announcements and reminders for next week. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the lesson today. Our focus is going to be on kind of the foundation of the Supreme Court in the early Republic. And I'd like to start today, instead of a discussion about who served on the court, etc., I'd like to start today with a warm-up question. And so you should be sitting in partner tables right now. If you're not, or if we have an uneven number of people, please go ahead and form a group of 3 with someone nearby. And I'd like you, in the next 5 to 6 minutes, to discuss the following. In your groups, I want you to consider how the following experiences might shape an individual's decision-making process. So be prepared to share your conversation with the class. But what I'd like you to talk about is, after surviving or experiencing the events I'm about to show you, how would that affect the way that that particular individual makes decisions? So the topics you're going to have are surviving a war, serving in Congress, witnessing a chaotic event that could possibly lead to worldwide chaos, and being a target of extortion and or blackmail. So take the next 5 minutes in your partner groups to discuss this, and if we could please have our substitute teacher pause the video, that'll give you guys time to do that, and when we're ready to start again, please start the video again. All right, so now you should have had a class discussion about this. Hopefully all of you got to share your perspectives. What I'd like you to do next is, I want you to imagine that all of these events, surviving a war, serving in Congress, witnessing a chaotic event that could lead to worldwide unrest, and being the target of extortion and or blackmail, I want you to imagine that one person experienced all of these in their lifetime. And how would that affect their decision-making after surviving these events, both from the positive side and the negative side? So please discuss that with your partner groups right now, in the next 3 to 4 minutes. If we could pause the video, and when you're ready, we'll start the next step. Okay, so now that you've discussed what one person's decision-making or how that decision-making could be affected by surviving all these events, believe it or not, there is one such person, and he is a founding father that nobody knows about. And we're going to hear a very famous American literary figure, Oliver Wendell Holmes, we'll talk more about him later, on this person that experienced all four of those things that you just discussed. And it says, I quote, "I do fully believe that if American law were to be represented by a single figure, skeptic and worshiper alike would agree without dispute that the figure could be but one alone, and that one is John Marshall." There he is, right up there with Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, and yet he never gets that billing of being a founding father, and he should. He survived the Revolutionary War, fighting in Washington's army. He amazingly survived the deadly winter at Valley Forge when Continental soldiers were so hungry that they resorted to cooking the soles of their shoes for food. After the war, he served on the Virginia legislature as well as being a member of Congress. He is an ardent Federalist, so he's definitely a pal of Alexander Hamilton. And he was the longest tenured Supreme Court Chief Justice that our country has had, close to 35 years. He's going to be appointed by John Adams as he's leaving office. And so as he kind of takes the reins of the Supreme Court, John Marshall is bringing all those life experiences that you guys discussed to the table. As you saw, he survived a war. He served in the legislature. He also witnessed the events of the French Revolution, which were extremely violent and chaotic. And many people around the world thought that could be the beginning of something very large in terms of world, kind of unrest. And he was one of the people that went over to France at the behest of John Adams to negotiate a treaty with the French. And he was part of the XYZ affair. He was the American officials that were basically extorted. They were told to give money in order to meet with the French ambassador to talk peace. So we're going to spend today looking at the court cases of John Marshall, and you guys will get a chance to see how much influence he had on not only the Supreme Court, but American history. And so, here we go. What I would like our substitute teacher to do at this moment is I'd like them to number everyone in class 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once you go through 4 individuals, start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if our substitute teacher could please do that. Please remember your number. And then we'll pause the video at this point, and then once everybody has their number, please write it down on that graphic organizer that you should have picked up, and we'll go to the next step. All right, so at the very front of class, you should see my 2 Star Wars mugs, as well as 2 tape dispensers, and 4 stacks of paper with the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 in front of them. What I would like everyone in class to do after I go through these instructions is the following. These are Supreme Court cases that are kind of the big 4 of Marshall's tenure. And they are Marbury versus Madison. So if you're number 1, that's the court case that you're going to be reading about. Gibbons versus Ogden. So if you're number 2, that's what you're reading about. Number 3 is you'll be looking at McCulloch versus Maryland. And number 4 is you'll be looking at Dartmouth versus Woodward. So in a moment, what you're going to do is everyone's going to get up and they're going to go grab their court case and go back to their tables. Once you return to your table with your court case, this is the task that you have in the next 20 minutes. I'd like you to read and annotate your particular court case. So everybody in their table groups is going to have 2 different court cases. And so you're going to individually read this. This should be a quiet activity. And then once you're done reading and annotating that court case, I'd like you to go to the graphic organizer, find your court case, and fill in a summary of the Supreme Court case, what the decision was, and then why is it historically significant. This should take you individually 20 minutes to complete. Once you have completed that, just stand by for more instructions. So if our substitute teacher would please pause the video at this point, you have your orders. Good luck, everybody. See you in 20 minutes. All right, so now that you have all become an expert on one of the four court cases above, this next activity is going to be a talking activity. Everybody's going to talk, no silence. And what you are going to do is verbally share with your table partner the contents of your court case, all right? So if I were sitting in a group, my partner would be sharing to me the kind of summary points of Marbury versus Madison. And what I'm doing is, as I'm listening, I'm writing this down in that section of the graphic organizer. Once they're done, I'm going to tell them about Gibbons versus Ogden. So as I'm telling them verbally, this is what the court case was, this is why it's significant, they're going to be writing down their own notes as well. So you have 10 minutes, full-on talking activity, no silence. That's creepy. And then after the 10 minutes, I'll take you to the next step. So if our substitute teacher could please pause the video now. Good luck. See you in 10 minutes. All right, so now at this point, what should have happened is that you should have two court cases filled out of the four on the graphic organizer. Here is where we are going to mix things up. You still have two remaining. So if everyone who is a 1 and a 2, please raise your hand nice and high so the 3s and 4s can see where you are. Do that now, please. No, seriously, raise your hands high. There you go. Okay. That's a little stupid humor, but hey, whatever, I'm goofy. Okay. Here's the task that you have. You need to complete the circle. That's a Star Wars reference, by the way. So you need to find a group who is the opposite two numbers of you. So if you're a group of 1 and 2s, you need to find 3 and 4s. And you need to get together and make lots of noise this time and share out the court cases that you are missing. All right? So by the end of this activity, everybody in class should have a basic summary of all 4 court cases. Let's go ahead and take 20 minutes for this. If it takes less time, even better. So if our substitute teacher could pause it right now. 1s and 2s, find the 3s and 4s. 3s and 4s, find the 1s and 2s. And get those court cases taken care of. Pause the video now, please. All right, so lastly, we're going to review these court cases, and feel free to take any notes off of what I'm about to show you. I'm going to try and give you a very basic synopsis of each court case and really focus on why they're historically significant. Now, all the cases in the Marshall Court are significant because they really do lay the foundation of American law. And a lot of the decisions that we're going to be covering later in the class and the scope and sequence of the class can really be traced back to these court cases. Now, overall, you're going to have to, between now and May, we're going to have to look at, review, and you're going to have to remember around 18 to 20 Supreme Court cases. Okay? These are 4 of them. But if you forget everything, if you only remember one Supreme Court case, the most important, to where all the other ones really kind of fall to, is Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison is significant because it gives the Supreme Court a power that the Constitution did not originally give it. As the story goes, William Marbury receives a job from John Adams as he's leaving office, handing over the reins of power to Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans. When Jefferson finds out that these midnight appointments have given all these Federalist jobs, he's infuriated. And he orders Secretary of State, James Madison, not to follow through on the commission, which is fancy talk for he's not going to give William Marbury his job. This, of course, makes Marbury angry, and he takes his case to the Supreme Court. Now, Marshall, this was a very brilliant move. He does 2 things. The first thing that he does is he denies Marbury, a fellow Federalist, his job. So in Jefferson's eyes, he looks and he sees this Federalist Supreme Court Chief Justice basically ruling in the Republicans' favor. It makes him seem very, very unbiased. On top of that, he removes the power from the Supreme Court of the writ of mandamus, which essentially allows the Supreme Court to force members of the federal government to deliver on commissions and the like. So this makes him look benevolent. In other words, he's not searching for power. But in these 2 moves where it shows his humility but also his fair-mindedness, he and the rest of the Supreme Court write in to the Constitution through legal precedent this idea of judicial review, and that's what's highlighted up there at the top right. This gives the Supreme Court power to review and determine the constitutionality of all laws, whether they are passed by the executive or the legislature. Now, they don't use this power very often because it's essentially a power they gave themselves. But this power of judicial review has greatly affected events in American history that we're going to be covering later on in the course. So if you forget everything, don't forget Marbury versus Madison. The other part of Marshall's Supreme Court, his legacy, is establishing something called the Supremacy Clause. This idea of upholding this kind of tenet in the Constitution that says the federal government always is supreme to the state government. Any law the federal government creates, state governments have to follow. Okay? State governments do not have the same power. This is exhibited in McCulloch versus Maryland. There is a huge debate in the early 19th century over whether or not the United States should form a national bank. The Republicans don't think it's a good idea. They don't think it's necessarily something that they have the power to do in the Constitution. There you see the Jeffersonian strict interpretation of the Constitution. The Federalists say, hey, it's kind of flexible, very Alexander Hamilton. So as protest to this, the state of Maryland decides to basically tax the federal bank, and specifically the Baltimore branch, which is run by a man named James McCulloch. Folks, states can't tax the federal government, okay? That's not how it works, okay? And so, of course, Marshall, being the Federalist that he is, said, no, states can't do that. He also says, yes, the national bank can be formed because of the implied powers of Congress, as outlined in the Constitution. And essentially, states can't tax the federal government. They don't have that power, all right? In addition, we see another example of Marshall kind of falling on the side of federal supremacy. In the strange case of Gibbons versus Ogden, these are two ferryboat captains running a ferry between New York and New Jersey. And one of them has a state license, one of them has a federal license. The one that has the state license, Ogden, asked the state of New York to basically restrain Gibbons from operating his ferryboat service. The only reason this guy wanted this to happen is so that way he would basically take out his competition. But because Ogden had a federal license, it automatically trumps any state license that was issued by the state of New York. And the significance of Dartmouth versus Woodward is one of contracts. Dartmouth was formed when the United States wasn't a thing. It was chartered when England was still, or had dominion over the colonies. And when the state of New Hampshire in 1816 said, hey, let's make this a public school, Dartmouth was like, hey, wait a minute, we have a contract here. And the state basically said, yeah, but that was with England. We're America now, so tough. But Marshall and his court decided in favor of the contract. They had a legal binding contract, which means that it cannot be broken. And that's the significance of that court case. So just in a nutshell, you have to remember Marbury versus Madison because of judicial review. And you're looking at a Supreme Court Chief Justice tenure where the power of the federal government is truly upheld over that of the state governments. So in closing, if you've gotten this far, or if the bell hasn't rung yet, I'd like you at your table groups to complete the following sentence. The significance of John Marshall's influence on the Supreme Court during his time as Chief Justice is... Go ahead and discuss it for 2 to 3 minutes. And pause the video now, please. Okay, so that's all she wrote. I hope all of you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Study for that unit test. I'd like you please to hang on to your court case as well as your graphic organizer. Those are going to be turned in as part of your toolkit. Don't forget you have a Schoology due on Wednesday, and we have a big test on Friday. So I hope all of you have a great weekend, and I will be back on Tuesday, but I'll be back on Monday too, so if you need to see me on Monday, come see me. Nice job, everybody, and may the force be with you all. Bye.